Well, welcome everyone to the Computer History Museum. So nice to have you here tonight. It's a warm day, beginning of summer, I think. This program is one that I've been looking forward to for the longest time, and I want to welcome all of our folks online as well as those here in the audience. When I started here at the museum 6 years ago, we focused on an evolving mission and purpose for the institution. We're a collections institution, and the mission had always been to collect and preserve for posterity all the artifacts, the oral histories, the programs, things of this ilk. But I had this sense that posterity was kind of an unknown and that we really should be focusing on people. And this program tonight really is the manifestation of the mission of this institution. We talk about decoding technology, the computing past, where we get agency, because we collect all these things, and the digital present, and the future implications on the human condition. Because life doesn't exist without computing. And this program tonight is really a real-time stack associated with bringing billions of people into the digital world. And there's nothing like it. It's a moment in time, it's a moment in history, and we have the good fortune of two folks tonight on stage who are going to carry on a wonderful conversation on this front. And this is, here we are in Silicon Valley, and everybody, sometimes you can't get a cell phone signal, which you all know, it depends. Why is that? So this is a real success story, and it comes from India. Our moderator tonight is M.R. Rangaswamy, who's been a really good friend to me personally for 20 years or more now. It's been an exceptional individual, an exceptional contributor to the industry, and now giving back in some exceptional ways. So I'm going to go down the list. It's too long for me to remember. MR's an entrepreneur, he's an investor, he's done corporate eco-strategy work and expertise for large corporations, he builds community, he's a wonderful philanthropist. He's been organizing, and I'll say this, I think correctly, the Indiaspora, which is a nonprofit that's going to connect and advocate for the overall Indian diaspora, I'm vowel challenged, so sometimes I miss those words. I have no IE in my name, so it's hard for me to do those things now and then. But MR started the Sand Hill Group, where he does angel investing, and there's a corporate eco forum. In his enterprise retreat, which is an annual event, brings together corporate executives from the enterprise software industry to share in a wonderful way, in a private way, so people really get to the truth. And so his contributions to the industry and to the community that cares a lot about computing and the implications on people is exceptional. And our featured speaker tonight, Dr. Pramod Varma, is the chief architect of India's unique ID system. It's a unified payment system, a digital signature protocol, all the credentialing, digital wallet systems, billions of people participating, just like we're hoping. He's the co-chair of the Global Center for Digital Public Infrastructure and adjunct faculty at IIIT Bangalore, and the CTO of XStep, I think I'll say that foundation, and the co-founder of FIDE.org and the co-creator of the Beckton Protocol. These two are going to give us a glimpse of what's happened in India and how it's spreading around the world. So I'm going to introduce MR and Dr. Varma right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I know we have a large crowd here in the audience at the Computer History Museum, but we also have a great online presence as well, both from within the US, but also in India. So welcome to everyone to join us for this program. And Pramod is a fountain of knowledge. So tonight we're gonna talk about a lot of things, but I wanted to start by painting a scenario, right? An Indian family goes to Paris. They decide to visit the Eiffel Tower, the most iconic place in Paris. They go there and they don't have any euros. They don't have any euros, right? So they go up to the ticket counter and they find that they can use their phone, their Indian phone, to actually buy tickets using this thing called, I guess, UPI, or acronym, right? UPI. Pay it in rupees, enter the Eiffel Tower, go up the tower, take their pictures and come back, and it feels like it's in India, right? They never left their phone, they never left their identity, and the French government is happy because they got their euros. settled at the same time, right? So is that scenario possible 10 years ago? Now it's possible, right?
Yeah.
That actually happens today. If an Indian citizen with UPI and a GPay account or whatever goes to Paris, and soon coming in many, many other places across Europe and hopefully across the world, right? That is the culmination of not something, it's not an overnight success, right? So how did this happen? I want to first take a poll with this audience and the online audience. If we could bring up the poll question, please. And that way you learn how to use Slido, and you'll see the poll question. How familiar are you with the India's digital transformation efforts? Very familiar, somewhat familiar, or not at all. This gives us a better read for the questioning through the program and for questions to come thereafter. So it looks like it's somewhat between somewhat familiar to very familiar. Well, the not at all is growing up as well. So we'll find out more. So gives us a pretty good read. It's across the board. But how did this happen? This actually happens today, right?
Yes.
Let's peel the onion. I mean, there are probably many, many, many layers, Pramod. And it's great to have you because you were the architect of the first layer of that whole thing, which was Aadhaar, which is the identity of every person in India. I guess it's somewhat equal to the social security number, although maybe not, as we found out, right? So you are the architect. So let's go to the basis, the history of this. The Prime Minister of India decides there has to be a system, and then he summons or requests our friend Nandan Nilekani and says, hey, can you become a cabinet minister and can you undertake this journey, this big mission for India? And then what happens? How did you get involved?
Excellent. Lovely to be here. MR, thank you for, I think this is going to be a good journey for us to be able to share what India went through to paint that scenario where someone can real-time pay in Paris. That's just crazy. So 2009, I think, was in many ways an important time period. That's when smartphones came. iPhone had already launched. Android was just launched. Cloud computing for nearly a decade at that time. Internet, commercial internet. It's about World Wide Web, 15 years. And India was struggling to give bank accounts to people. India was one of the least banked nation on earth in 2009. Less than about 15 to 17% of Indians had bank accounts. Most people didn't have an identity. We didn't have civil registries. This is in 2009. It made no sense.
15 years ago.
Right now, yeah, 15 years ago. And that's when I think the need for inclusion of 1 billion aspiring people, and India is very young. 70% of India is less than 35 years old. So it's really young India, aspirational. How do you bring opportunities to them? How do you include them? How do you bring gender parity in financial account access, ID access, and so on? Then, India is also very socialistic in one sense. So we do give a lot of subsidies to poor. During that time, India was giving about $50 billion every year as subsidy to the people. And, you can imagine giving $50 billion to people who you can't identify.
In cash.
There's no bank account, all in cash.
Bags full of cash.
Yeah. You know what's going to happen. Yeah. Nobody gets it really. Middlemen rises up. A lot of stealing happens, a lot of diversion happens. And that was about, at that time, 2.5% of the GDP. So it was not even a small number that India was dealing with. So 2009, June, is when the news comes out that Nandan Nilekani is being brought in as a cabinet minister. Serendipity, because he wrote about identity being pivotal to exist in a system. Otherwise, you don't exist. 1.3 billion people then, today 1.4 billion people, don't exist systemically if you don't have an ID. You exist physically, but you don't. For the system, there's no way for you to verify. And he wrote about that in the book, in Imagining India, his first book. He wrote about power of identity. And then, he gets called. He said, you can't just write the book, you need to actually do the work. Yeah.
It teaches you not to write a book.
Think twice before you're writing anything, okay? You have great global ideas. You get to pull in to do it. So then he gets to, do it, and he comes in 2009, he assembles. And that's, I think, the magic begins. June, I read the newspaper. I had no touch with him. I was not even aware
Where were you?
Going on. I was an entrepreneur. We founded a company in Boston, product company. India was not into products then,
Right.
1995. I'm old enough. So 1995, we started the company. 2005, we got acquired. And then I was a global CTO for that company. We had started our engineering operations in India. I was heading that. And 2009, one day I read the newspaper that, hey, Nandan is going to come in to do it. And, midlife crisis, So, said, we must do something for the country, right? Yeah, then I said, okay, let's do it. I literally got in touch with him and I said, I want to join. He said, are you crazy? I might be back home in like 3 months from Delhi. 4 months, they would eject me like an alien particle, and you'd be back home. He said, yeah, if you get ejected, I don't care. I'm okay. Either way, I'm okay to take the bet. So I quit my job and just volunteered to be the chief architect of the ID system. I don't think we knew really what we were getting into.
You didn't get any stock options?
This is the government job, right? And anyway, thankfully we were all, slightly well off, and we could take the risk, and it's okay. So we were doing that, but I think what happened in 2009, in June and July, is that Nandan being Nandan, I assembled a fantastic, positive coalition around this idea. Everywhere. I shamelessly reach out to everyone. And I know Mo and all the guys, right? We reached out to some of you, and we were in all the companies asking, can you do, what can you do? Are you a technology expert? Are you a policy expert? Come in. And we assembled a group of people and really thought about how we want to go about. Because we did not want to do another ID card. It sort of made no sense to, especially people like us, right, who came from the private industry, thinking platforms, APIs, stuff like that we talk about. And government doesn't think like that. They want to give a good-looking card, right? And we were like two worlds coming together to say, what is really identity? What does it really mean? How do we create something that can scale to 1 billion people at a fast pace? Because you can't do this for 30 years. If you have to do it, you have to just do it in 3-4 years. Otherwise, just don't bother. So that means extreme minimalism. So he assembled that group. And the difficult part for us was that he went and promised 600 million people. He said, he promised Prime Minister in his deck that we would get 600 million people in 4 years. We said, no one has reached 600 million people. I mean, you can't just line up 600 million people. That's like twice US.
How big was the core group?
Core group, eventually about 5 people. Yeah, really small. Group of people. And the entire organization was really small. And there is a streaming movie going on the 12-digit masterpiece. It's in some of the streaming thing about this. So very few small team came together. But that I think the number he promised was the turning point.
Yeah.
Because then you realize that if you want to do 100 million, you would be in a comfortable state to think that you can actually do it. Then you are in such a comfort zone that you play the normal game. When he promised 600 million, all of us were falling off the seat, right? Because I don't know how to do it technically. Policy guys don't know how to do politically. You don't know how to get funds that fast from the parliament. That itself it takes a year to get anything out of the parliament. You can't set up offices. You can't recruit people. By the time you do that, it's like 2 or 3 years. We only had 4 years, 600 million people. So we had to really think very, very differently. I think then in July, end of July, early August, we published our strategy paper, where the design principles and how we are going to do it was articulated in the original, what we called a UID strategy. It was not called Aadhaar, UID project. But then there was no looking back. It was just crazy.
And
good fun crazy.
when did it get released? The software get released to have the first?
Again, I think Nandan already promised. So we didn't have much choice. Okay, he went and said, we'll launch it in a year. In 4 years, we'll get to 600 million. Okay. So we had to launch it in a year, get to 600 million, right? So we were very, very clear. So we started in 2009, July, and we were ready by 2010, July. But then politically, it got launched in September of 2010 for the first person getting the identity. It took 260 days to get to the first millionth ID holder. By then, we were doing 1.5 million every day. And we got to 600 million people in less than 4 years.
Wow.
And 1 billion in 7 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how big was your data center for all this stuff?
Yeah, technology geeks. So I was here, by the way. I traveled here, picking everyone's brain because we just didn't know. The number was so large, then we said, okay, nothing works, and we had to ask the big guys, here, to say, how the hell are you doing all the large-scale computing? How do you do it? And clearly, the answer, and we called Nandan at that time, and we told him, it doesn't look like it's feasible. And most people told me, technically, that you will need a soccer stadium full of $1 million computers to even try to achieve this. So even if it is theoretically possible, it will be economically unviable to be able to do it. We didn't give up. We said, hey, there must be something to do, some ways of thinking. And then we bet on, entire system was built on open source. Entire system was parallelizable for the computing crowd. And we were doing roughly about 1,000 trillion biometric matches every day on our compute grid. And we expected at that time, maybe 15,000, 20,000 square feet of data center, we will need to deal with it. But we eventually ended up, Moore's law played out, and we ended up with 3,500 square feet. Probably some of your
I don't know, Daniel, what's the size of this auditorium? Probably 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So the whole data center
was
this room.
It was quite manageable. So I think if you have the right principles and right ways to keep it extremely simple and incentive aligned, I think both practically you can actually roll it out, and from a demand side, and people keep asking, even 2 days ago, then I was at a dinner, and they were asking, why did people stand in line? People just cannot figure out, why would you stand in line?
In India, people like to stand in line.
Love standing in line. They would stand in line twice. What if the first line was not correct? I would come back and stand in line. Really? You just need to get few people to stand in line. Then line will form. Yeah. So you just seed, bootstrap with few people. And then
so where are we today with Aadhaar? How many people are on Aadhaar?
1.4 billion people. So 1.4 billion people have digital identity. It can be used, by the way, it's fully credentialized. That means it's on your wallet. For the people who have smartphone, people who have feature phone or no phone, they can still have a printout with a cryptographically protected QR code. So it can be used offline without internet, offline without any server access, or online. And online we know because it does hit our server. Online we use about 70 million times a day, maybe, yeah.
And it's biometric, so it cannot be.
And biometric and both mobile. One-time PIN. So and you can have multi-factor authentication, all the good stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But it's really simple, by the way. It's extremely simple. It captured just 4 attributes. So it was the simplest idea.
What were the 4 attributes?
Name, date of birth, gender, address, and India included transgender as first time in our history as one of the into the Aadhaar program. So that became and very, very funny things like this. Indians don't have first name, last name concept. So people would ask, as a designer, how did you design for the diversity of India? And so we eventually had to determine that what's in a name. You are biometrically unique. So, it doesn't care. We don't care what you want to be called. Yeah. You can say whatever you want, right? It doesn't really matter. Because if you really ask all the document proof, then you're going back to, it's a chicken and egg issue. If they all had document proof, they didn't need an ID project.
Right.
The fact that half the country didn't have any documentary proof is the reason we are launching an inclusive ID. So we can't ask for the documents, right? So we used, it's a very interesting thing. So we had to create a really inclusive thing. For example, when we do homeless, enrollment for homeless, they had no address. So we would take address of the shelter. And it's okay. Because we would think, what does it mean? Address is just for communication. Everything was digital. So it didn't really matter. And they would later come back and then say, change address. Today, every one of them has bank accounts. Every one of them.
In India, I only had one initial, M. I had to take R when I came to
just
this
for the
country.
sake of his last name, right? Yeah. Yeah, but we have names like Om, just 2 characters, and we have names with 7, 8 words. Whatever.
Everything in between.
Who are we to say?
So you got 1.4 billion records.
Yeah.
What do people do though? What was the next step in the architecture?
Excellent question. Actually, because we came from private industry, we were thinking like a product. Who is going to use it? Product market fit, usual stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, you don't ask these questions in the government, but we were thinking, saying, why would they get it? And it's not even a good-looking card, by the way. My father was quite disappointed. He said, really? You quit all your job and, get me this laminated bag? I said, yeah, because you are your identity. That's a manifestation of what you show is just a proxy. We didn't care, right? You can prove how you can tear that off. We don't care. You can print it again. So because we really made this digital, natively digital, right? It was hard for the people. They wanted something good looking, it's okay. And then we were asking the question very early, MR, that what is the real demand, killer use case? And the killer use case, for example, I was telling you we were giving $50 billion US subsidy. So our real killer use case was to get subsidies directly to the bank account of the people. When they realized that, first time I can get a bank account. We had 17% of India banking then. They can get bank account and government will give me money. It's very good because anyway I'm supposed to get it, entitlement, some sort of entitlement. I can get it in the bank. So that was our killer use case. So we really went after that. Except that the Identity Authority, the project that we did not have the mandate to actually do anything with the banking sector. So that again brought our private sector thinking, saying that if you are a platform builder and you want a third-party ecosystem to use your APIs and platform, you have to evangelize. You can't mandate, you can't force. You have to align the incentives and evangelize it. That's what we did. I think the team Nandan, led by Nandan, really evangelized in the banking sector with the central bank, saying that, hey, Holy Grail, financial inclusions are Holy Grail. We need to open bank accounts for women. We need to really get there. Here's the first time in India, you can actually do an electronic KYC without diluting your money laundering norms, terrorism funding and all that. Because post 9/11, much of the world financial sector tightened the norms. The tighter it got, the less people got in the global south into the system.
Right.
Direct correlation. The more the banks ask, the less people get in. So we had to go back with a digital instrument to the bank saying, now you don't need all the cost of paperwork. You can actually onboard instantly. And the cost of bank account opening came down from $10 to 10 cents.
Wow.
Straight. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And the number of bank accounts now?
Bank account went up. We opened new 520 million bank accounts. Out of that, about 60 to 65 million, 65%, so about 450 million or so, or 400 million or so, are women. And we opened about 900 million accounts right now. So it's
Fabulous.
nearly a billion people
Fabulous.
accounts. So it's a universal. Banking became universal. Everybody has bank. And much of the subsidy now is directed to women because multiple reasons. Women, hold the family together. Men drink it away.
True.
TV remote and beer is good stuff, right? You can actually sit around. So, but it's also that they are the vote bank. So, the multiple reasons. Women are very socially conscious. They hold. So, the very interesting possibilities emerge, and gender parity is completely equal. Every woman has a bank.
So you got bank accounts. Now, how do they use the money?
So that was a very interesting question. Putting money into the bank account is not enough. Why? We have 700,000 villages. And banks have no incentive to open bank branches into any of this because traditional way of bank going to the village made no economic sense. Because much of the accounts would be $5. People would deposit $5, $2. And I would need an office. I need to get officers there. I need teller sitting there, ATMs and bank branches and vaults. It made no sense for any bank to do it. So we had to close the demand side gap. And so we created an open ecosystem of what's called a micro ATM, like a EMV POS machine, credit card machines, but using fingerprint authenticable machines. And then we looped in India Post like USPS, which had great reach into every village, and banking correspondence. So the people who would go to the bank over the village once in a week, they would go on a bike and do banking. So we created an open ecosystem where entrepreneurs can compete to create new devices like Square. New devices can be created. And new services can be offered completely by entrepreneurs on top of that infrastructure. And that bridges the access gap without banks going to the village. So we keep saying, in India's scenario, banks never went to villages. Banking went to villages. That's a very, very important. What digital can do is bridge affordable access bridge. It's amazing. But if you do that through an open ecosystem, then entrepreneurs are it's sustainable. Otherwise, government only funding all this is not going to work. It's just.
But they had to make payments, so you needed a payment system.
So we created a new protocol, which is built on top of the ISO payment 8583 payment protocol to use biometric authentication to actually transfer money. So we created an open loop protocol for the banks to take money, and the fact that they were not depositing $100,000, right? They were depositing $1, $5, and so on. So small machines with fingerprint authentication, open loop banking. We created the API, integrated all that thing into the open banking system. We had to go through convincing them, but by 2013, 14, banking started everywhere. Yeah.
And then how did you get to do this thing at the Eiffel
Yeah,
Tower?
that time it was not popular. Yeah, you're right. So the Paris story, it came later. So in 2014, we reached 600 million people. We are starting to taste the banking penetration. That's when the current Prime Minister came into power, and he launched a mega program called the Digital India. And Digital India was a wonderful reimagination of how digital can be used to provide access. Access drives agency, and quality drives outcome. But if you don't even have access, you can't just speak about outcome, right? You have to get access vector solved first. So he said we need access to finance, financial products, access to healthcare, access to education, and digital is the only way we're going to get 1.4 billion people, 700,000 villages. There's no other way we're going to get to it, right? So he created both fiber connectivity program, which is a physical program, and on top of that, he created 3 more building blocks in addition to identity. One was about digital signature, and we have a legislative support to create digital signature. Why is digital signature again? It's very simple economics. If a bank has to take lots of paperwork to complete you, onboarding you, and give you a loan offer, a lending offer, a mortgage kind of offer, paperwork that we do, all of us do, it's okay when the quantum of money that you are dealing with is very high, because the cost gets subsumed, because the return for the bank is much higher than the cost. But when it comes to micro
$10
transaction,
loan, yeah.
$10 transaction, $500 lending offer, this paperwork makes no sense to the bank. It's that I would spend more time onboarding you, transacting with you, dealing with compliance.
Right.
The paperwork has to be kept for 7 years. All the compliance work, and after that, to do what? To get a tiny interest rate from you. So they would rather say no. So they would only deal with the top of the pyramid, and they won't deal with the bulk of India's pyramid, because simple economics. So the electronic signatures solve the paperless workflow under our legislation called IT Act. And then at the same time, 2015, we launched credentialing infrastructure, much ahead of the Apple Wallet and Google Wallets and all that you see today here. We have all our licenses digital. Academic certificates are digitally verifiable. Digital doesn't mean PDF, by the way. They are natively digitally verifiable, like your boarding pass in your wallet, right? Or your, I think, California vaccine certificates in wallet, for example. Not everywhere. We'll come back.
We still have these paper
Okay, all right, okay. Sensitive topic. Okay. We were very, very clear that if you don't dramatically collapse the cost of customer onboarding, cost of transactions, cost of compliance, we will never get high volume, low value transactions going. And much of India needs high volume, low value, not other way around. People like us do high value and low volume. Okay, so we need a new fabric, digital fabric that allows us to do. So we did digital credentialing infrastructure, which is about 6.5 billion credentials today and 250 million users, quarter of a billion users. And then we launched UPI.
UPI.
So UPI, I started writing the protocol with the National Payment Corporation of India. A couple of us did that in 2014. Just because we were imagining, we need paperless, we need cashless, we need presenceless. Digital realm, if I have to transact, I need presenceless, cashless, paperless mechanism to establish trust, do transactions in a highly trusted, low-cost manner. So cashless was a big deal for us. India is heavily cash. Continues to be cash, by the way, but it was only cash then. And merchant, 40 years into credit card, just to give you numbers. Indians had 22 million, all of India, we had 22 million credit cards.
For 1.4 billion people.
1.4 billion people, 22 million credit cards. So,
in this country,
people like us. And we have two of them, right? So you can even imagine, yeah.
Here we'll have 1.4 billion.
Twice, I think cards. 3 cards per capita. It's about 900 million cards. Here it's about 900 million cards for 300 odd million people. So it's about, we had 22 million cards. Less than 50 million, which is 5% of adult population, did digital payments, period. We had 5 million point of sale machines where credit card can be used, because only 22 million people had cards, so you only need that many machines. So what do others do? Cash. Pretty much everywhere, right? So we were reimagining, and we were already seeing. Into China, we had WeChat, Alipay, and we had already a company like Paytm in India trying to do some of that. Brilliant innovations playing out. But we wanted an open loop system. We wanted an HTTP or SMTP for payments, right? So we said we'll write UPI protocol, and that was about, we built the protocol up front saying we need an interoperable open loop system if you really have to target 1 billion people to do payments and not end up with monopolies. So if you want to play that game well, interoperability for techies, interoperability is a great way to demonopolize a little bit, right? So it's a good play we did, and we launched UPI pilot in 2015, and 16 we launched actually live. the zero transaction in 2016, and last month we did 13.5 billion transaction, and we transacted $2 trillion. So on top of that, we have, that's the power of, we were in this room, I should tell, I must admit, we were relentlessly working on, inspired by the core internet architecture. Even today, we get goosebumps. Some guys thought through this so well. It's just crazy amazing. 50 years of TCP/IP just happened, right? Beautiful. If you're architects, you know, right? Beautifully unbundled design. Ooh. So we are thinking about what does beyond internet happen? What happened to stuff beyond internet and GPS? There was no public rails. It was all private goods, walled gardens, all the game that played out. India, we were new to the digital game. So we had a little bit of luxury of upfront imagining the HTTP of payment, and we created UPI. 500 banks, hundreds of apps. That's what created that network effect that gave us 13.5 billion transactions, which is roughly the volume of MasterCard worldwide, by the way.
Wow.
In 6 years.
Wow. And let's look at the cost of all this stuff. Like Aadhaar, the universal ID. What did it cost the Indian government or the Indian taxpayer?
It was expected. There was an interesting project in 2008, I think. It was 7 or 8, maybe 8. UK identity project. And it was very popular because it flopped like crazy. Okay, and it's also because I think the society didn't need it. Probably they had a good civil registry, so it was a high friction, low value game. We had high value and low friction. So,
right.
You have to be in that quadrant to play this game well. You can't go after incremental value, but lot of friction. Why bother, right? So, but the cost of ID was 150 pounds at that time. And in a developing nation, we were thinking about maybe $10, $20 we'll end up with. We ended up with $1 per ID. Entire cost. That's all we spent.
That's like recently.
I think it was our funny thing. We have some secretaries, now $2, yeah. $2 eventually over 15 years. 15 years, after 15 years, we have spent $2 per person for authentication, data center, cost, everything put together. And, interestingly, secretaries or, civil, officers would find it very uncomfortable going to the parliament and asking for small money. They said, what do you mean? I want to ask big money. I want a budget. So Nanda would say, we don't need the money.
Yeah.
He said, no, we need the money. Right? So it was very interesting, but we negotiated to ask, I think then maybe 2 billion budget approval. But we reached 1 billion people with $1 at that time, 7 years. Now, over time, 15 years, we would have spent $2 billion. And that's for identity.
Yeah.
So do $2 per person. The e-sign, the digital signature, government spent nothing because it was an open protocol and market players were building on top of it. So protocol, actual builders were market players. They would offer digital signature workflows and so on. So cost was spread into the market.
Yeah.
Then the credentialing infrastructure with 6.5 billion credentials and 250 million people, we launched in 2015. So 9 years later, we spent about $10 million. 10 million.
10 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's about it. Government has spent only that much. Very little. Because it's an ecosystem play. When you play ecosystem game, the cost gets spread. We do minimum stuff. Ecosystem adds on. And the collective effect, the domino effect.
The cost is amortized over
amortized over many institutions. They do the campaigns. UPI would have been launched. I think we launched in a couple of $1 million. Now maybe a couple of 10, 15, $20 million maybe spent on UPI by the main team. But Google Pay. Google Pay is one of the biggest players on top of UPI. They would have spent their own money. Customer acquiring, merchant acquisition, and keeping the game up because it's an open loop system. So there's enough competition. So they have to be up it. So collectively we would have spent, but government didn't have to spend. That was a very interesting learning, that you don't have to build a full stack, as technology is called, the whole thing. If you can lay the highways, digital highways, and let the entrepreneurs build innovation around it, you can create a mega economic impact without actually spending only for the highway. And physical highways cost much more, digital highways cost really less. It's not much.
That's similar to what NASA can learn from India in the ISRO mission, the Chandrayaan mission last year, that went to the moon, cost 75 million.
Yeah, less than the movie. Interstellar or something. I think they spend more time.
And for the US to send something to the moon cost $1 billion, right? So it's a similar way of looking at things, I think, in a very different way.
First principles way.
Yeah.
To look at the cost structures. Yeah.
So you've got UPI, you've got bank accounts. What else does this system offer?
So then after 2016, there was a seminal talk by, again, Nandan reimagined and talked about the idea that Indians are going to be data rich before they are economically rich. Because we are digitizing the society so fast. So he put out a hypothesis saying, if that's going to be the case, it's imperative that we look at individuals and people owning their own data and using data as a currency, data as a soil, not data as an oil to extract, data as a soil to build their life. If that's the case, what is the architecture for that, and what is the legislative framework for that? So last year we brought in our GDPR-like legislative protection and ownership rights. And then we have Siddharth here. Siddharth was architect for our open data architecture, where data of you can be accessed only by you by authenticating, authorizing, and then you can consent using a digital consent artifact and electronic consent mechanism to actually share with, for example, I can take my financial data, taxpayer data, and actually apply for a loan to get from a lender. Today, the lending is all paper. Right. So if a small, medium trader actually walks into the bank and says, I want 100,000 rupees, which is whatever, $1,500. It's impossible for the bank, because the amount of verification that's needed to even prove who you are, what you do, what's your revenue, what's your flow, are you bankable, are you lendable, and then actually do the underwriting. To do what? To give $1,500? My cost will be more than $1,500, right? So it doesn't even make any sense. Today, we are giving literally $10 loans instantly, because that fintechs and lending techs and banks are able to underwrite algorithmically, digitally, because you get a cryptographically signed data stream that I can harness my data and actually offer you a copy for you to be able to underwrite me instantly. That's what happened post 2016. That network is now live. Then COVID hit. COVID hit us, and then we had to a few things, good stuff happened in COVID though. A lot of bad stuff happened. No one expected COVID to happen. We didn't prepare ourselves well. We are terrible. Half of India is moving around because of the economic progress in the cities. They would start walking back to their villages, and all kinds of stuff happened. Unimaginable things happened. They were walking for hundreds of kilometers with their family because this is panic setting in the first lockdown, right? But some good stuff happened. Good stuff is that serendipity. We had already laid a digital identity, digital payment, digital education, and digital healthcare, some of the vaccination infrastructure. We were preparing ourselves for some other reasons, not for COVID. And these came in handy during COVID for us to be able to actually, we transferred $1.5 billion to 175 million people at a fraction of a cost instantly to the bank account. So the money didn't stop, food didn't stop, a lot of other things stopped, like schooling stopped, But school stopped, but schooling continued. Because schooling, we already had an education infrastructure, that extra foundation where I'm a CTO, where we had already laid a national education infrastructure for us to be able to do school, multilingual, multi-curriculum education. So schooling continued, schools got shut off. Although the social aspects of lockdown was terrible, of course.
No, it was really bad because at Indiaspora we raised $15 million for relief in India, right? But one of the programs we chose was to go visit crematoriums and cemeteries and stuff to find out who died if they were the sole breadwinner, to give that family $400 of money because they never had any jobs anymore, right?
But you didn't have to give cash.
We didn't have to give cash. It was all done digitally, and that was a beautiful system, the way it worked, to get money to the family digitally with no, full audit. And I have to commend India for doing that. Otherwise, we'd be with this money thinking, who's actually getting the money?
I think that's why I think we are inspired quite similar to a physical infrastructure like highways in the US that completely changed the economic landscape. Or a digital infrastructure like internet. It was not built for one thing. It was built as a general purpose playground that allows all kinds of innovation to continue to thrive. Some things would work, something would fail utterly, but the playgrounds have a smart way entrepreneurs have a smart way to do that, and they will continue to innovate. We were imagining same way, much of our work, saying, if you lay the infrastructure, countries become resilient to unknown shocks like COVID, and we can use the same infrastructure because entrepreneurs would find a way to use that to create newer workflows and newer solutions that is necessary for an unknown future.
So I know you're not stopping on your laurels, resting on your laurels, right? Right now you're building on the stack, right? Taking a little break maybe, but you've got this new paradigm now you're calling, I guess the government is calling it ONDC. Can you kind of walk us through what's next?
It gets crazier and crazier a little bit, okay? It might get confusing, it's all right, it's okay. Little bit. So we were, in 2018, we had done the UPI, we were asking, what are the other fabrics that we must worry about? And one of them was very interesting. India is a massively fragmented microeconomies. Our B2C commerce, the most popular e-commerce, B2C e-commerce, is only 8% of India's B2C. 92% of the commerce happen nothing to do with e-commerce. It's all fragmented outside. At the top ride-hailing platform does less than 3% of India's mobility, urban mobility, 2 to 3%. 97% somehow figures out how to move around. Our agriculture economy is fragmented. Skilling and education and job markets, because much of our pyramid is blue collar, gray collar, like our task rabbits and delivery boys and things like that here. Gig economy is huge in India, but imagine we have equivalent to task rabbit there, but they're all nibbling less than 1%. Less than 99. So massively fragmented. Fragmentation creates high asymmetry, high cost, and increased middlemen playing in. So we were imagining what is the new economic exchange fabric. Not money exchange, not data exchange, but economic value exchange protocol. What is HTTP for? Moving economic goods and services. And then we built something called Beacon Protocol, and we have some good fans here, and we are really supporting Beacon Protocol even here, and we have massive global communities. It's on open source, completely open source effort. We were bullish to reimagine because we needed it for India, but when we were doing, we wanted to be an open source because much of global south, you go to Africa, you go to LATAM, you see the same thing, or Southeast Asia, you see the same patterns playing out, by the way. So we did that Beacon protocol in 2018-19 time. during the COVID. And that gave us some runway to build the protocol and build the open source community around it. And then many entrepreneurs, that's the beauty of entrepreneurs. You create a playground, people just show up, right? Because I think these are new entrepreneurs, young, let's take on Uber, let's take on Amazon, whatever. They are shameless in imagining possibilities, right? Which is brilliant. Which is this, I'm in the thick of, that place. Everything began, and this energy here, entrepreneurial energy, is everywhere among youngsters, wanting to disrupt something, try something out. And India is going through that, unlike 90s, or unlike when we grew up in 70s and 80s, it was about getting some government jobs or whatever. It's all about entrepreneurship now, right? Creating our own pathways in life. They would show up to say, now I can use backend protocol to reimagine a decentralized ride-hailing system.
So the way the use case would be, I don't have Uber, but I'm a driver, entrepreneur, and I can put myself saying I will.
So an entrepreneur who could write a software for the driver,
right,
could say, I'm going to acquire all your drivers, but unlike the two-sided marketplace, if you look at Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, everybody is a two-sided. They acquire providers on one side and then acquire customer. Right. And after some time, the intermediary become nicely, positioned to dominate a little bit. And that creates a little bit of unrest. They bring brilliant value. We could not have reimagined this, by the way, without them. But there's always a time in history where disruptors get disrupted by somebody else. So this was a movement where we were saying, hey, now, unlike 2010 or 2015, a driver has a smartphone. It's a full-fledged computer in his hand. And they have fully connected. India's cost of 1 GB mobile data is 10 cents.
Yep.
Okay, so Indians are the biggest mobile data consumers in the world, mostly watching YouTube. Driving, watching YouTube, whatever. So it doesn't matter. I think once you close access, then they start transacting. When they transact, they get to choose products, they get agency, and that's how you move up and right. So
the use case would be, I'm a driver, I've got my phone, I say I'm available, someone finds me.
Not someone, how do you find? Now the question, we unbundle this two-sided marketplace through the protocol, like HTTP, and say an entrepreneur can get three-wheeler taxis. Another entrepreneur can get a bunch of four-wheeler taxis. Both of them are on the grid.
Okay.
And on this side, maybe somebody like Google Maps could say now, instead of custom integrating with each of the platform, they could use an open protocol to transmit the intent of a passenger saying, I want a ride. I'm here. I want a ride.
And I want to go
And that get transmitted through the protocol to both of them real time. Respond to them saying, I can provide the ride. I can provide, here's my quote to ride. I can choose. So behavior look exactly like Uber, by the way. But it's completely decentralized. This creates network effect. So we went in less than a year, we are doing millions of transactions on the decentralized network in one city. And we are now going pan-India. But interesting thing, because the protocol was global, we have networks, 40 plus projects around the world, including US. Amsterdam went live, their own decentralized network. Some entrepreneur picked up the protocol and said, hey, we have the same problem. And Berlin, for example, saying, we threw Uber out, but we have no other choice. Maybe we can do it ourselves. France, Nice, for example, taxi drivers have been asking in France, saying that why don't we could use it. Brazil went live in one of the cities there. Gambia has gone live. US has.
But this can also be used
right here.
This can also be used in retail goods, right?
Retail goods, any service and goods.
Right.
So the backend protocol was not for ride hailing. It was very generalized like HTTP to transact any economic resource. So we have backend mobility, backend commerce, traditional goods. We have backend energy. New energy entrepreneurs are actually real-time bidding and trading on a programmable energy network right now. It's live. Thousands of transactions going on. Peer-to-peer energy trade.
So
Very interesting. So some crazy imagination you can do. That's where we are. So,
Okay.
but it's very early. It's still early because we literally did that in 2020. Every one of these takes a decade, okay? You need real patience capital to be able to, internet didn't happen overnight. But the good thing is that if you unleash entrepreneurial energy on top of a open fabric, you see magic happening. I think that's what we are, and that magic transforms new economies. It may not transform old economies that easily because you have incumbents, you have not much value. Why should I use it? All that thing happens because you have credit cards. Why do you need things like UPI? But it's very clear. Much of population on Earth is actually somewhere else. So they need it. So when the countries are digitizing right now, they have an ability to leapfrog.
Yep.
And reimagine.
So I want to ask another polling question and then go to questions from the audience. I already have some questions coming from you, but send us more. But let's do this poll. Should the US government invest in creating similar digital public infrastructure? I want to meet with the guys who say no. To ask them why. Why wouldn't you want this, right? But I think overwhelmingly, I think you can see 73% of the audience says, let's go get it. So hopefully we'll tell the next president of the United States that this is a big deal for them to discuss in the next cycle.
It'll be fun to watch.
So we have some questions. So some of them have gone to the top of the list. So the first one, this is about cybersecurity and issues dealing with that. How does this whole system, Aadhaar, UPI, et cetera, ensure the security of biometric data? What measures are in place to prevent data breaches?
Excellent question.
Walk us through that.
When you digitize the society and create digital systems or digital platforms, even though they are minimalistic in nature, it is essential that we design security into the architecture and not as a patch later. The good thing happened. Everything I talked about, none of these are centralized. So two patterns, design patterns that we used is minimalism and decentralization. Very important pattern. First, if you don't have data, you don't have to worry about cyber threat. So you have to really minimize the data that you own. So we, especially public systems. Now, private systems might collect data for variety of customer acquisition reasons and cross-sell, upsell reasons and so on. It's for them to protect the data.
But can't you break into Aadhaar system? And
So these two patterns, the minimalism and decentralization was across the system. So there's no one mega system. Now let's take identity. That's a question. Identity as an example, one of the building blocks. It had 4 demographic attributes and of course 2 biometric attributes. So biometric attribute had to be all data had to be protected. Of course, it's because it's personally identifiable data. It's identity data. So we had to design the capture systems. That means front-end capture systems, transport, storage, retrieval, and subsequent authentication and usage. Entire chain. So we literally had world's best cryptographic expert who were reviewing our architecture. All our architecture and APIs are actually open. So we had, again, I think that's if you have a way to engage the best people in the design rather than throwing RFP and hoping the vendor is doing a good job, you can actually do, because as Nandan would all the time say, you can't outsource thinking, you can outsource doing.
Yeah.
Right? You have to think yourself. So thinking needs people. So you could reach out, like Bruce Schneier and people like that. We would reach out to actually say, break this, review this. So we would review the design upfront. So the way biometric, even from day one, this is 2010. It was 2048 PKI asymmetric key encrypted from capture, transport. Every layer was digitally signed. By the way, inside the Aadhaar system, officers can't see more than 5 records at a time because they can't even search the database. An entire database, including every row of the database, is actually digitally protected, encrypted, and signed. That means DBAs can't see, database administrator can't see, backups can't see. We were and we put out all this design, by the way. We wrote all this design, put it out, saying to break it. But that's not enough. It's a cat and mouse game. Constantly, threat vectors are changing, constantly. Even today, a deep fake, can you do a photo authentication against Aadhaar using a deep fake? We are dealing with that right now. So how does you do liveness check? And then AI is creating super live fakes.
Right.
So, this is a game that we have to continue to play. So we engage ethical hackers and we engage formal systems. Aadhaar Identity Authority of India has a formal program for engaging both contracted engagement of cryptographic experts and so on, and ethical hackers for us to be able to do.
This is a good question. What surprises did you see? You expected something to happen, but people used it for something completely different.
So I think we sort of knew, frankly, because we had a lot. What we as a designer, I would use something called a stress test use case, okay? Because that's how I designed to see, is my infrastructure generic enough and context invariant enough for many, many solutions to emerge? Because if I build the infrastructure with a use case in mind,
right,
then I can't go to another use case. Like GPS is GPS. I didn't build GPS to imagining ride hailing. So we have to design with use cases. So we would crowd collect from many domains, many use cases. So we would sort of know what's happening, but there were good fun surprises, like standing in line was a good surprise, because we didn't expect people to actually, because people like us wouldn't stand in line. So why would you stand in line? What's the value? Government, who cares, and all that stuff, right? We rationalized so much that, but people just, so some things were very fun, good stuff. Some things was 3 times. For example, identity system went through 3 times, stayed at the death. UPI at least twice. We could have died. We were looking at many reasons. Incumbency, lobbies, or just not taking off. You just don't get the right killer use case. Like as an entrepreneur, you will find platform just not getting used. I thought you could build the best platform. Nobody's using it. So we were looking at some of that, including privacy debate. We had the longest privacy debate in the Supreme Court. So some of them were hard experiences for the builders like us, but hey, that's democracy.
Another question, this is now not just in India, but in the global south and even in the West. So what about authoritarian governments controlling too much data about citizens? And why not have private sector do some of this and not entirely leave it up to governments?
Yeah, so much of India's effort, this is what I was saying, identity was a sovereign attestation of your ID. No different from Social Security or birth certificate. Why do you get birth certificate? Why do your towns have birth certificate data? Why do they need to register birth? When did we start? Maybe Victorian era, maybe registering births. Why do we need to register? Why does the state need to know? We can ask very interesting questions, but assume some of that exists in the system. So identity was an attestation by the sovereign saying that you are a resident. It was not even citizenship, by the way.
Right.
You could get one, or any of in non-Indian citizen. If you come there, if you are living there, you can get one Aadhaar. It's like Social Security number in one sense, but purely digital, right? Mm-hmm. So we had to really bring some of that into play, I think. So, interesting way to navigate the system. Yeah.
What are some of the other critical challenges that the country still needs to address? And more importantly, people in the audience and online, how can individuals contribute to this and support these initiatives?
I think this goes back to the idea of digital public infrastructure, DPI as we call it, is having the minimum public utilities, extremely minimum, and sometimes it's just a specification, not even code, that allows the private innovation, a vibrant innovation to thrive. So how can you contribute? You can contribute to build, you can contribute to evangelize, build the infrastructure itself, or you can build on top of the infrastructure as an entrepreneur. And what are the problems? India is the land of problems. Okay? If you are running out of problems, you should show up.
Here, yeah.
Yeah. We have 1.4 billion people, long way to go. We are still a developing economy. As once, I think, Friedman was saying, Indians are in a quantum state. Everything that's wrong is also right. Everything is true is also false. Nobody follows the, chaotic, seemingly chaotic society with some method to the madness. So we have a lot of problems in terms of access to healthcare, education. We don't even know what it means to be educated in 2040 or 2050. What does it mean to be educated in the world of ChatGPT and 4 and ChatGPT 4.0 and they're like coming, right? Why do even they write exams? What does it mean? If they had all those tools, what is left in the education? Is education about collaborative problem solving? Feel free to use all the tools. Is that how it is? We have to figure all that things. So we have much to do. Agriculture is huge. We just started working on, we're going to launch this year an entirely digital agriculture infrastructure because 40% of Indians are agri. We are still agri heavy. So we have a lot of problems to solve. Much to do.
Okay, big elephant in the room, right? AI. All of the Bay Area is now only talking AI.
Very good, very good. Yeah.
How does AI permeate the India stack or the digital public infrastructure? How is AI going to be used?
There are two ways that we have been thinking about AI. One, if we had this digital fabric with many solutions, now payment solution, lending solution, investment solution by fintechs playing out, how can AI supercharge it? One example of that supercharging is that there's about 100 million people who can do English. Maybe 200 million people can recognize English words and symbols because they can navigate YouTube and WhatsApp or whatever. Beyond that, it's hard. So no use showing long English consent and choose from the select drop box and all. You just don't understand. So they watch entertainment, but they can't transact. They can't interact with the computer. Because Indians are also language diverse, by the way. We have 22 official languages in the constitution, and Bangalore speaks about 107 languages, I think. Yeah, we have hundreds of languages. So it's one of the things we are doing is bringing voice AI and Indic language AI to supercharge the transactability or interactability of human beings, the next 600 million people, to be able to transact beyond the watching entertainment. It's huge. So if AI can bootstrap the fintechs and health techs and ed techs and so on, to really, so AI to supercharge DPIs. Think of that. That's one part. We are also asking, how do we apply the infrastructure thinking, DPI thinking to AI, to democratize AI? So one is AI, apply AI to supercharge whatever we have built. And then second is, what part of AI should be democratized? So we are putting out like Indic language data sets, Indic language models, so that our entrepreneurs don't have to wait for 2 APIs from the 2 companies here, to be able to do it. We need a lot more people to be able to do it. And a lot more open source has to happen. And that allows a lot more permeation, global.
Right.
Of AI. So we are asking that question, what part of AI needs to be democratized that allows AI entrepreneurs in India to build a lot more things beyond what they're doing? For example, geographical agriculture, survey systems, crop insurance system through drone imaging, or health tech system through imaging. Much can be done. It's beautiful what AI can do, by the way. All your investment in AI, keep pumping money, by the way. It's amazing. Because AI, India needs AI. And I'm telling you, AI needs India.
Awesome.
No way you can otherwise succeed.
So, this is 2024 is the year that 60% of the world is going to elections, right? India is finishing up one. I think the UK is going to have one in the summer. The US, the big one, is coming up in the fall. So can this type of system be used to run elections?
No. At least whatever we have built so far had nothing to do with election. Social media, of course, we keep asking the same question. Deepfakes, social media, very targeted algorithmic manipulation of bubbles that you are typically in terms of messaging. Sure, it's a worry. It's definitely a worry that all of us must worry about it. All of us must deeply think about it, deeply care about it. And it's important. And assuming that people can read and write and distinguish and intelligently, it's a wrong notion. We have to understand most people it's a herd mentality. They would just do things that are what everybody is doing. So that means even more gullible. Actually, can quite heavily influence. So I think we are.
But you're not going to put an election
No.
application or build a layer.
This is where you make the mistake. Make the mistake of trying to take the hardest problem and trying to attack that.
Leave that to the politicians. Yeah.
But maybe 2035, 2040, will we have remote voting in India? People who are traveling, could they vote? Maybe. Who knows? World is digitizing anyway, but we are not going to force it because there's much to discuss about anonymity, traceability, any other voter roll manipulation, scrutinizability around all that thing. Much to discuss. And for the social entrepreneurs and others to discuss all these things to get to whenever India is ready, we'll get to it. Not now.
So we've got 30 seconds for the last question. This is a fun one. I heard that cell phones are most common way to access internet in India. Is this true? And this person is watching us on YouTube.
Yeah. So if you are developing anything, do only mobile or mobile first. And people who are on laptops are people like us. I don't think you should target us anyway. So if you really want large population, even the browser-based access is, if you look at our statistics on some of our education platform, you would see it's mobile browser. So the interface is actually mobile. So the form factor is smartphone, and almost nearly 70% or above families have at least one phone now. But typically owned by the men first, and then the woman, then the children. And there's a hierarchy that would play out. But nevertheless, it's very cheap. Phones are very cheap. Connectivity is very cheap. So that's playing out well.
Pramod, I hate to do this, but our time is up. It's been a wonderful journey, starting with the whole stack. Thank you so much.
Don't go away. Don't go away.
And Daniel, thank you for having us here.
No, thank you so much.
Wonderful audience.
No, I just want to wrap up a couple of comments and then thank MR and Pramod. My takeaway, it's really fascinating to listen when you start to talk about first principles and sort of basic questions. And the things that came to mind for me were, what is identity? And you covered that in an extraordinary way. Then you start to talk about commerce and exchange, and so therefore, what is money is another question, right? And then what's the interface between humans and computers? Because in the beginning, humans were the computers. Remember, we used to call them that. Mostly women who were doing the math. and then we invented computers, and then they started to take over in a different way. And this is a very fascinating sort of ground up first principles. It's your identity, you're born with it. It's given to you in a certain sense by the state if you're in an economic situation, but just the first principles are so fundamental, and this is such an extraordinary moment, and the pace at which you've been able to have this materialize, and obviously, as you pointed out, the level of, if you will, unbanked or unconnected people in the world is huge. And so this, I think, is just the beginning of a wonderful, what I hope will be an extraordinarily long-running series here at the museum about the contributions that have been made as a result of this work in India on a global scale. And so I'm looking at this really as a fundamental kickoff. I'm very, very excited about it. And I also really like the notion that it's your data, and there's no reason why you can't auction that off into the market, right? So that turns on its head so many of the things that have trapped us into these little rabbit holes and caused so many confusing things in society these days. So there's something afoot here that I think you did an exceptional job communicating to everyone. So please join me again and thank. Great. Great.